Hi, this is the video recorder for Flightplan Visualizer version 1.24. 1.23, which implemented this new feature with logbooks and employments, was released in January. And this version released here in April contains a lot of improvements aimed at those logbook and employment features. As per usual, it comes with updated flight plans. This version will be bundled with, well, actually, I don't know the exact number now. I'm at 1,814 flight plans, but I still have some flight plans to import. Most of them are updates of older, so I think it will not change that number significantly. AIG have started using a new flight plan format for some of the general aviation flights. And those flight plans do not contain a schedule where specific dates and times are referenced. So those new flight plans cannot be imported in Flightplan Visualizer, as it needs exact days and times for these scheduled flights. It means that AID have released some military flight plans, updated military flight plans that I cannot import. And I will then keep the old ones instead. But all commercial flights are still using a fixed time schedule, so there's no issue importing those. In this version, the aircraft, the Piper PA-46 Malibu, I have split it into three separate types. So now there is a separate type for the M500 and M600. And a few other minor changes have been made to the aircraft database. And the airline database is updated for each version, as when I import new flight plans, I will see there are some changes, new airlines or airlines that have been defunct or airlines that changed their name and so on. Let's first look at the changes made to the LogEntry. If I go here and say I want to make a new flight, let's just choose an employment flight. You now have this illustration that's connected to the status of the flight. When you create the flight, you have this notebook with 2 lines and you have a dotted or dashed outline. That's the illustration I chose to use for creating the flight plan. And the reason I added these illustrations, I think it's quicker to see the status of the flight just looking at this instead of reading the text here. So let's just save it. Right now it has status creating. Now the flight have been created. So when I open it to view it, you instead see it's no longer a dashed line, and you have 4 lines here in the notebook, and also the colors are more bright. So let's just close it and say we want to commit this flight. And now you have this check mark. It have a dashed outline, and you see the green part is not completely filled. And it's because we are completing the flight. It is not completed yet, but we are in the process of completing it. And I'll just cancel this one, and we can open the logbook and look at one of the flights I have performed. As this one is completed, you no longer have the dashed outline, and you have the full green check mark. The reason I added these is because when you are performing a flight, let's just create one again. It's important that if you are mid-flight and you want to update something in the logbook, it's important you choose this view where you can change some of the things. Not this menu, this menu. You can change some of the things here while you're viewing it, and when you click OK, you are not committing it. So if you want to change something and you by accident choose to commit the flight, you can easily see that you are actually in the process of completing the flight. But also when you click OK, it will ask you if you want to, but perhaps you're not paying attention to what it says. So hopefully avoiding completing a flight by accident should be avoided by at least if you remember to look at this new illustration. Also, I've added some small changes here. For example, when you create a flight, let's cancel this and say create. Here you choose the aircraft you want to use for this flight. Here I can choose the TBM 850 or the TBM 930. When you choose the aircraft, here in the load sheet, it loads some data from that aircraft, and one of the new fields I added is a range. You cannot set a specific range for an aircraft because the range it can fly depends on the weather, how much payload you bring, how much fuel you bring. If you bring a lot of payload, you can bring less fuel. If you only are the pilot yourself, you can bring a lot more fuel. So this is just a number for aircraft. Take it as a rule of thumb that will be the range of the flight. But now it's listed here because you can compare it to the range up here. And also in this check, I added some checks that if based on the departure and destination airport, if the range you have chosen for this flight exceeds this range, here in the check part, you will be notified that I think it'll be when you exceeds 80% of the range, it will be listed here as a warning and or an error if it's above. So you should be able to not pick a too long flight that you cannot actually perform. Also in this version, I have addressed the logic of which fields you can edit and when you can edit them. When you create a flight, you can change most of the things here. You can only set out time when you leave the gate or expect to leave the gate, because these fields are calculated. But once the flight is created and you view it, here while you perform the flight, you can edit all of the times. In previous version, these were open also. But in the previous version, when you were committing a flight, many of the fields in here was locked, so you could not change them. And of course, while you commit the flight, you should be able, for example, if you estimated you would arrive at a specific gate when you created the flight, but when you finish the flight, you actually know ATC assigned you another gate. So if you want to keep those information, you can now change them while you're committing a flight. Also in this version, I shouldn't have changed it. In this version, these times are for you to enter when you leave the gate, when you take off, when you land, and when you arrive at the gate. In previous version, you had to write this down or go in here and change it into these values manually. But if you have FSUICP and you are connected to the flight simulator, you now have these buttons you can press. In settings, you can choose if it should automatic connect to FSUICP. You have this auto connect, and you can set it up to play a sound when it connects and when it disconnects. So if you want to use this, I would suggest you use this auto connect. If not, you can manually choose to connect or disconnect from the flight simulator. But as of now, I've chosen to auto connect. These are grayed out. And by far, it's more easy to use the auto connect feature. And right now, I don't have the flight simulator running, and as such, I'm not connected to FSUICP. However, if I was, you can now click this button, and it will obtain the UTC time from the flight simulator and fill out this field. And if this check mark is checked also, it will also fill out these new fields added here in the bottom. it will check, and via FSICP, it will check what your payload is, the weight of the passenger and the weight of the cargo, and it will automatically fill this field. And it will also use it will also read how much fuel you have actually loaded and fill out this field. Up here is the values up here are the your planned payload and your planned fuel. Down here you have your actual payload, how much payload have you loaded using the loader of that aircraft, and how much fuel have you loaded using the loader. If you plan to take off with a specific weight, you should aim to actually load that payload, and the same with the fuel. You should aim at trying to load that payload as close as you can, because you should, of course, bring the amount of fuel and payload that you had planned. So by pressing these buttons, you can update those things. So the way I perform a flight, I have a Flightplan Visualizer running in the background. So as soon as I'm ready to leave the gate, I simply click this button, and I think it will ask you if you want to update, and you simply answer yes. Then I will taxi to the runway, and either when I'm cleared to enter the runway by ATC or when I'm actually on the runway, I press this button, which will update this time. And the same when I have landed either directly on the runway or as soon as I have exited the runway, I press this button to fill out this time. And when I arrive at the gate, I will press this button down here that will update this time here. And you see this last one also have a check mark. And if that check mark is checked, it will update your actually remaining fuel. As of now, you are not judged by your performance, but I would like to add that in a future version. So, for example, if your actual remaining fuel dips below your final reserve plus alternatives, what you expect to final reserve, you will be judged by that. You have a dip below that, it will have a negative effect. And also, if you fail to load your actual block fuel is not the same as your planned, the actual payload is not the same, I will judge you by that also. But again, that's for future version. Beside updating the UTC times, it will also update your real times. These first, if you look at the local times up here, they are affected by the time zone offset of the departure airport, and these two are affected by the time zone offset of the destination airport. That was also the case in the previous version. However, now the difference between the UTC and the local time is actually the time of your PC. So when you click this button, it will extract the UTC time from the flight simulator, and it will also update your out time using your UTC and local times. And the reason the program both have a sim time and a real time is because in a future version I would like to allow you to use accelerated time in your flight simulator. However, you'll be judged by the real time. So if you perform a flight, your real time in the simulator, perhaps you're simulating a 8-hour flight, but actually you only spent 2 hours flying it because you use accelerated time, you will only be credited for those 2 hours you actually fly the time. So pressing these buttons, these will be automatic updated also. Another change in this program is I've added hint views to these. Down here you can set up if the weight of your payload and fuel should be listed as pounds or as kilo, and you can simply change it here, and it will default to the weight unit you have chosen in your settings. So I run with the settings of pounds because all the data in my database are in pounds. So even though in Denmark we use kilo, I have set up Flightplan Visualizer to default to pounds. That means if I am loading an aircraft with a payload where I have to specify it in kilo, in previous version I would either have to change it here or I would have to use the unit conversion. In this version I added some hint texts. So when you hover the mouse over these fields, for example here, when I hover over the payload, I will both see it in pounds and in kilo. The first line will be what you have selected here. For example, if I change to kilo, you will see the first line is kilo and the second is pound, and vice versa. If it's in pounds, I will see it here. So here I can see that loading this aircraft in Flightplan Visualizer, in the simulator, I should aim at about 424 kilo or as close I can come. What I do is, in the flight simulator, I simply try to aim at the weight, and if I cannot obtain that weight perfect, I will choose the one I can easily select that's a little above, so I don't bring less payload. Of course, you need to pay attention to the percentage here, so you don't get an overweight. When it comes to fuel, you will see a lot more information. Here we see a close-up. The block fuel for this example have been set to 837 pounds, and you see it here in kilo, but you also see half of that value listed here. And the reason to list the half weight is out here is because for many small general aviation aircraft, they have a left and a right tank for fuel. So if you need to specify the total fuel, you can simply use this value. And if you need to specify it specific for left and right tank, you can see here how much to load in each of those tanks. So you have them both as pounds and as kilo, but you also have them listed as volumes instead of weight. And when it comes to volume, you need to know the density of the fuel. How much does 1 kilo or US gallon of fuel weight? And it listed with these 3 different types of fuels because they have different densities. So if you need to specify it in US gallon and it's, for example, Jet A fuel, you'll see in this case that these 837 pounds is the same as 124.7 US gallon. Or if you need to specify it for each tank, it will be 62.4 gallon. It's in the left and the right tank. So here you have 3 different listings with US gallons with different densities, and down here you have the same 3 densities but listed in liters instead, and also liters per tank. So with this hint view, it should be easier for you to load the correct amount of both the payload and the fuel for these tanks. Let's look at the loader for these aircraft. For example, here we have the loader for the FSR M500. You have to specify, you have these sliders down here. You see here it is actually listed in gallons, and it's listed in gallons per tank. So you can use those hint views and then move this slider up and down to get as close as that value you can. And when it comes to the weight of the passengers in this loader, you specify, you have a slider for each of the seats and for additional cargo or luggage. And you will need to move these sliders, and what you'll do is you'll look at this payload value here and try to get the same payload that you have in your load sheet. If we instead look at the default loader, what I do here, instead of specifying per seat, I simply move the fuel loader until I see the weight here in kilo of the fuel. So I move that slider until I see the same value that I have set up in my my load sheet. And the same when it comes to the payload, I simply move this slider and look at this value down here and move the slider until I get as close as possible as this one. So using these new hints, it's easier to find out what you need to set in your aircraft loader. However, looking at this, I saw I had a problem with the way I have specified the loader and the load sheet. Because the way I have set up the program, it had been aimed at, from the beginning, Flightplan Visualizer was aimed at commercial traffic. And when it comes to commercial traffic, I would have the weight of the crew included in the basic operating weight of the aircraft. However, as you can see here, you have to specify the weight of the pilot, and that weight will be included in the payload. So that meant that the weight of the pilot was always excluded from the load sheet. So what I've done in this version, let's cancel this flight so I don't save it by accident. When you go to your user aircraft, for example, if I take the TBM, here you have the weights for each kind of passenger types, male, female, child, and it's some default weight, but you can, if you have a loader that uses other weights, you can simply change them here. But as I said, the pilot was not included in the weight. In this version, you now have this checkbox. Include the weight of the crew in the load sheet. The name here is very short, but you have this tooltip that explains what's it for. And you now have this new field crew member weight. It will default the same weight as the male up here, but again, you can change it. So now with this check box included, if I go let's make a training flight. And I choose the TBM 850. When you go to the load sheet, you'll now see the crew weight. So even though we have not loaded any passengers, or we have not loaded any cargo or luggage or anything, the total payload will already start at 200 because we need the weight of the pilot included. So let's randomize. It suggests, so in addition to the crew weight, we now have the weight of the 4 passengers, 2 male, 2 female. We have the weight of the luggage. And now we have a total payload where the weight of the pilot is included. So when we hover over this, this is actually the load we are going to load using that loader. Also in this version, I have changed when you either press these up and down buttons, or you simply scroll with the mouse. In previous version, the amount it would add here every time I scroll the mouse was a fixed value. In this version, it's changed to be a value that's based on, for example, here with the fuel, it looks what is the maximum fuel capacity of this aircraft. So when you see, if I simply click this up button, it steps in 20 pounds. But if I choose, for example, Boeing 737, it will be a lot more. It will step each time because it's based on the weight of the fuel. And the same with, if, for example, I want to add cargo here, you see when I press up, it steps in 10 at a time. And if I scroll with the mouse, it's that value times 3. It ends at 62. It's because we now reach the amount of payload we can actually add aircraft. So if you want to use these up down buttons and or scroll with your mouse to for example bring some additional cargo, it's not a ridiculous amount. They go up and down. It should fit the weights of the aircraft. Also, another thing, that's when you create a flight with a general aviation aircraft, it will not by default add additional cargo. It did that in previous version. If it's a passenger flight, if a commercial aircraft flies with passengers, typical they bring cargo and earn some money that way. If the flight is not full and they have the means to add additional cargo, that's a way of have some income for that airline. So it's normal they bring some additional cargo beyond the weight of the passenger and the luggage, but it's not so normal for general aviation. You can still manually dial in a value if you need to. In this version, I also fixed that you can actually set the emergency time. In previous version, that value for the emergency time was not saved. In this version, you can choose to save it, and like these buttons you have here to obtain the UTC time from the simulator, you also have this button. So if you want to simulate you have an emergency, you can either manually later enter the UTC time you had that emergency, or when you have that emergency, you can simply click this button and it will obtain the UTC time from the simulator. Let's cancel this one and instead use an assigned flight. Here we have departure and destination time. A departure and destination airport. And we now have this flight map where you see a map showing you flights. As Flightplan Visualizer is not a flight planner, it have no information to know how you're going to fly this flight. So it's simply illustrated with a great circle line or arc. But let's send these data to SimBrief and plan a flight in SimBrief. So I simply click Generate Flight. And as soon as it's have been generated, I can import the data. And down here, the last check mark is to download and import the actual flight plan. So I choose to do that. And now you see that we have the flight plan here, and we also see it here. The extra balloon marker we got here is the alternative airport. And it will, when you create this map, it will try to automatic zoom and pan the map so you can see the flight plan. But if it's not 100% perfect, so you can zoom and change pan around as you want. And actually, when you save a flight, it will remember that zoom factor you had here. So these are the changes I made in this version to the LogEntry. One thing I forgot to mention is in this version you can now pick airlines visually. When you go to plan a flight, let's choose a training flight for the TBM. You can, as usual, you can simply click this button and you can enter the CAO code. For example, if I know Aalborg is EKYT, I can simply enter that, or I can enter the name of the airport, if I can type. And this is fine for choosing the airport. However, if you don't know the CAO code or the name, or you just doing a training flight and you don't know exactly from where you will fly, you can now, for example, you can hold Shift and press the button to open this window, or in this version you also have a context menu. So if I right click instead, I can say what I want, and I can say I want to pick an airport from the map. And right now we have an airport selected here, but for example, I can say I want to choose an airport, and I can either use my include these markers, for example, my favorite aircraft, or all major airports, or if I want to see them all, I can choose all of my small and tiny airports. But you can also simply let's use this favorite for now. I can right click this marker and say I want to set this as my departure airport. Even though you have these departure and destination airport, you can only select one airport at a time. And the reason you have these is because I can click this one and say, okay, I want to set Copenhagen as my destination airport. But the one you have this radio marker is actually the one you're selecting. So let's say we want to select this Rønne airport in Denmark, and I click OK. It will be set here, and then when I enter that feature again to pick an airport, you can see that now we have Rønne as the departure, and it asks me to select a destination. And let's say I want to fly to somewhere in Germany, for example near Hamburg. I can right click, and instead of using markers, I can say I want to pick a nearby airport as my destination. And it simply lists the airports in ordered by distance from where I click the map. So the one nearest to where I clicked is this one. But I can choose any of these, and I simply choose this one, for example. And if I click OK, it will transfer this airport back. We start at this departure airport, and down here you'll see the distance from the mouse cursor to that airport. That's my departure. As of now, I both have a departure and a destination. You'll also see track distance. It's basically the distance from this line to where the mouse is. So when I near the mouse, you see it's a low value, and the longer I go away from that, you have that destination. But you will also see these fields up here. As I explained previous in the video, in this version, you can see the range of the aircraft. And that range is, when you enter this form, it will take the range of the aircraft and put it here. You can then choose a percentage value, and it defaults to 80%. So it set the range limit to 80% of the max range, because you will have some additional when you do a real flight plan, it will not follow this great circle arc, and you'll need to specify an alternate airport and so on. So it will list that, and the reason it does this is when it calculates the distance between the two airports, if the distance exceeds this range, it will be listed red, so you can see you can not actually fly this flight, for example. Let's choose an airport here. It doesn't matter which one, just you'll see now it's listed in red, and that's because the range is listed. The range simply exceeds this listed range limit. But let's go back and pick another airport for departure. And it's the same we choose before. So now it's no longer red, and you can see this distance is a lot less than this. So we can simply click OK, and as I said, you can only pick a single airport, so it's important just to verify the radio button here that it is in fact this airport you're picking. So now you have, instead of choosing the airport by the CAO code, you can pick them from a map in this version. Let's clear this airport. Let's say I want to fly from Leipzig-Halle. And then let's pick an airport. For example, if I want to fly to Greenland, I can enable the markers and pick one, or I can simply choose nearby and say I want to fly here to this airport in Greenland. As you can see, with this max range and this range limit, we are right now exceeding that range. So what I can do is I need to find an airport instead that's between these two. And that's the reason you have this en route airport. So I can see, okay, can we fly to Iceland? I know we have Keflavik here, so I could search it by its ICAO code, but I can also simply click here and say nearby, and I say I want to choose that for my en route airport. And we have Keflavik here, so I simply double click. And now you have these blue lines. You have a line from the departure airport to the en route airport. It's this part of the line, and you have a line from the en route airport to the destination airport. And you have the direct distance. That's the distance following the great circle arc here. And you have a total distance, and that's the summary of this distance and this distance. So we can see in this aircraft we cannot fly this flight as one flight following this direct line. However, it's possible for us to fly it as two flights. So we can fly one flight where we begin at Leipzig-Halle and we fly to Keflavik. We can see here it's 13,022. So it's less than this range, and then the next flight we can fly is this one. So you cannot save these two flights, but you'll have to plan them as two separate flights. But you can see it's possible for you to fly this flight from Leipzig-Halle to Keflavik. So if we choose this flight and click OK, we now have the first leg of the flight, and we can actually fly this flight. And next time when we finish this flight, we will simply plan it from Keflavik to Narsarsuaq in Greenland. So that's how you use this en route flight. Let's look at the changes made to the logbook. If you open the logbook, you now have this new tab sheet called Flight Map. Here in flights that you also have in previous version, you can see all the flights you have performed. One of the changes here was in previous version you had a column for the simulator aircraft and you had a column for the aircraft type on which that simulator is based. Now I have removed that column with the type, and I did that to make room from this new column employer, so you can easily see if it's an employment assigned flight. When you are employed, you can actually see who your employer is. And you also have this extra column called land. When you perform a flight, you will have a planned departure and destination airport. But for example, in this case, it was a return flight. I had some issues. Actually, this one I had some issues with the aircraft. It was new. I bought the new Garmin plugin, and I had some issues. So actually, I just took off and returned back to the airport. So you see. This was the planned flight, but actually I returned back to my departure airport, and it was only logged as a 4-minute flight. And this one, I don't recall why I cut this flight short. Perhaps I was simulating an emergency. No. perhaps I had to do something and was not able to finish the flight. In any way, I chose to land at a different airport. And the way you specify that is when you have the flights, and if you have let's just choose one. It's not important. I just need one. You can set this one and say I actually landed here. By default, it expects you to land at your planned destination, but if you actually land at one of the alternate, you set this one when you commit the flights, and it will be listed like that. So let's cancel this one and return back to the logbook. So those were the changes to the flight list view here. But as I said, you have this new flight map. And here you can see all the flights I have performed. When I released the previous version in January, I actually decided to make a new empty logbook for myself. And I made a logbook where I was only initially type rated to fly the new, for me, I bought the FSR Piper 500 aircraft. And I decided that was the only one I was type rated for, and I started to fly that aircraft. Right now I see all the flights I have flown. Here you can see the aircraft types, and here you can see the category of these flights. So if I choose none and I select the M500, you can see the flights I flew in that aircraft. And basically I wanted to fly that aircraft from the manufacturer back to Aalborg, Denmark, which is my nearest airport. So I had, because the range of that aircraft is not very long, I had to fly this as multiple flights. So first I flew this leg of the flight. As I hover the mouse over it, you can see the distance between those two airports, and you can see how many flights I have performed. In this case, there'll only be one, because I simply flew the aircraft back here. If I want to see the flight, I can simply right-click when it's highlighted like this, and see I want to view the flights. And in this case, I said there's only one, so it's only display one flight, and double-clicking it, I will see the flight here. And here, if I had imported these data from SimBrief, you can actually see the actual flight. So here's the departure, here's the destination, and here is the alternate. When I arrived back in Copenhagen, I decided to fly a little with the Cessna 172, and I flew a single flight in the DR 400. Right now you not see a leg, and that's because this actual flight I departed from Aalborg and I returned back to Aalborg, so there is no flight to see. Then I wanted to type rate for the TBM. I think I flew in the 850, yeah. So all of these flights I've flown here was simply because I needed, in order to type rate for an aircraft based on the difficult settings you have, as you can see here, I need to fly at least 5 hours of training flights before I can type rate. But also, when you need to type rate, you need to have enough type rating points for that aircraft. And I actually didn't have enough type rating points, so I needed to fly multiple flights in the TBM 850 in order to build up those type rating points, so I could actually type rate for this aircraft. And you can see if I deselect all of these, and This is actually the type rating flight I flew in that aircraft. And once I was type rated for that aircraft, I could seek employment. As you can see, University of North Carolina, they operate the TBM. So actually, as I'm recording this, I'm still employed by North Carolina, and to this time I have been assigned 20 flights. Of those 20 flights, I have flown 13 of them, and I have skipped a single. And that's the reason my loyalty score is still considered to be low. I only skipped a single, so my completion factor is high. But because I only flown 13, my loyalty score is low. So you should ideally fly at least 30 flights. At that point you should have a good loyalty score, and then you can consider leaving this employment and seek employment elsewhere. And as you can see, it's a little more than 2 days ago I flew the last flight, so I have 70.2 days to commit the next flight, unless you need to commit the flights within this time limit, otherwise you'll be fired and it will have a bad effect on your loyalty score, and that will make it hard for you to get your next employment. And remember, if you cannot fulfill this, it's better to request a leave of absence. But here is flights I've flown in this aircraft. These I have flown, these are all assigned flight while I have been employed. Some of the legs I should have been flying more than once. For example, this one, flight number 23 and flight number 24 have both been between these airports. It's been in different directions, you can see, but it's still considered the same route. This one a single time, and this one a single time also. That's how you can visualize them. If I choose all, you can see all the flights I've flown. Even though I'm not type rated, I have flown, for example, if we choose none and select this one, you can see I've flown a single flight in the PDM 737-800 and simply flown as a training flight. I've flown multiple flights in the Pilatus PC-12, and actually one of these is actually a type rating flight. So I'm now type rated for this aircraft. So once I have flown my 30 flights employed by University of North Carolina, I am considering that when I reach that point I would seek employment for an airline operating this aircraft, because I have the type rate for that now. So while employed like I am here with the University of North Carolina, I'm flying this part of the States here at the East Coast. I can do other flights. Actually, I think my next flight will be an additional flight in the TBM. Me and a colleague talked about a route I plan to fly. So I will probably take another training flight in the 737. And when I have enough type rating points, I can type rate for that aircraft. And so my third employment will probably be for the 737. But don't forget, if you get a little bored, for example, right now I'm with this employment, I'm only flying this TBM aircraft, and I'm only flying in this region. But if you want to fly something else, if you're type rated, you can do a chartered flight, or otherwise you can simply do a training flight. Also, as I'm type rated for the TBM and the Pilatus, I can do free flights in these aircraft also, where I can simply manually pick my destination. It will not increase my rank with my employment, but it will build up my type rating points, so I can type rate for larger aircraft. So this is the map added in this version. Let's look at the last part of this video as the things that have changed that are not connected directly to the LogEntry or the logbook. In this version, I've added a lot more shortcuts, and in previous version you had to manually select these menu items, but now you have these shortcuts: Control S for assigned flight, Control F for free flight, Control T for training flights, and as T is obtained here, I chose Control Y for type rating flights. Also, to commit the flight, you have Control M, and to view the flight, Control W. This one you had in previous version also. Here also you see many new shortcuts. Control A was in previous version also, but Control N for airline and Control C for aircraft is new. As I recall, these three was in previous version. This one is a new one also. Control U for user aircraft, to create or edit user aircraft, and Control O for accessing the conversion. So once you learn these shortcuts, it's easier to enter these parts of the program. Another new feature in this version is you can now set up that it should look for things that have been logged, errors and so on. You can set up that it should check for that at startup. For me, I would like to see when I start the program if it have detected that I have errors or fatal errors or warnings logged in my logbook. And when enabled, it will simply automatic show a window. When you start the program, it will show a message box telling you have these issues logged and ask if you want to see them. And if you answer yes, it will simply open this show log where you can see the log. Here you can see all of these are logged as info. But had there been an error and that feature would be enabled, it would automatically show it. Likewise, I also added this feature where you can ask it to warn you if it detects that the ARIC cycle have changed. This program doesn't use the ARIC cycle as such. When you create a flight, it would log which ARIC cycle is the active. For example, if I go in here and I look here and I choose the route tab, you can see this is the actual ARIC cycle. It will simply list it here, and it's simply an informative to tell your future self that if you look at this flight, you can see which ARIC cycle was the active when you performed this flight. Also, that ARIC cycle I have added to my about box. I'm running a debug version of the program, so I have some additional buttons I use for various things here you will not see, but here you can see the ARIC cycle that's active, and you can see when it's valid from and to, and when the ARIC cycle changes. So if there is a new ARIC cycle tomorrow, when today it will log which ARIC cycle is the active, and when I start the program tomorrow, it'll see it's a different ARIC cycle, and if it is the case, it will simply display a message box. And I simply use that to notify myself that I would need to, for example, run the Navigraph software to update my nav data to the new active ARIC cycle. So if you want to use that feature, then enable it. Otherwise, simply disable it. Also in this version you have a shortcut. When I right click the map, I have an active logbook and I'm currently employed, so I have this menu item, and when I choose it, it'll simply load the leg search feature, and it will populate it with the data from my current employment. So when I click search and OK, these are the possible flights that I will be assigned in my current employment. So that's a way you can easily visualize that now. Another feature in this version is when you select different flight plans, it will automatically pan and scale the map to display these flight plans. It's not perfect. In this case, for example, I can zoom in an extra level and still see them. But it's a lot better than the previous version where it will only pan the map and not zoom at all. So, for example, this one is a small one, so it zooms in a lot. So that's just to make it a little more easy. As I said, it's not perfect. It have an issue, for example, if you have a New Zealand-based airline. They'll typically have flights that go out of the map here and enter over here, and in that case the zoom factor might be off, but again, I think it's better than it was before. So that's a new feature added in this version. Also in this version I dropped support for the old airport markers. The first released version of Flightplan Visualizer, it used the default airport markers or map markers included in that software. But at one point I decided to make my own markers, and the reason for that is, for example, when you see these airports you have marked as your favorite, you have this asterisk inside the marker, and that was not possible with the old markers. I'm guessing most of you are using these markers because they have been the default markers for many years now. But the program still allowed you in settings to choose your own old airline markers, and that's no longer possible. I simply dropped the support for them. Likewise, when you look at the gate map, in previous version, the number or the letters for the gates, you had the option to show them both as here as a matrix font, but you could also show them as a segment font where it looked like a segment from an old calculator. And those old segment font is also been removed from this version. So this is how it looks now. Also, when you enter this gate window, it will also try to automatically pan and zoom the map so you can see the gates. Again, it's not 100% perfect, but it's better than it was in previous versions. So if you have an airport with a few gates, for example, if you only have 3 gates near each other, you will probably go to this zoom level so you could see those 3. But here you have a lot of gates down here and up here, so it will pan and zoom the map, so it better fit. Let's look at the airlines. If you have this new Control N to search. In previous version, when you right-clicked, you had a menu item here called Show Usage Report. And it would simply show a text report to you about with the information about this airline, which routes they flew, which aircraft they operated, of which they are a carrier and operator, and so on. Instead, now it opens a form, and this form will default. You have 2 tab sheets. You'll see the map as default, and you have this one called report. This was the report you saw in the previous version. You could see which flight plans have been used to supply these data that's displayed here. You can see which hubs have been identified as primary, secondary, For each airport, you can see how many destinations they serve. You can see which countries they fly in. You can see all the routes down here. Here you can see the aircraft for how many are their carrier and operator off. And you can see which airports they fly to and from, and which aircraft they operate to access these airports, and so on. But also you can see it as a map. Let's not, for example, like this. I can see how much these are the routes operated by this King Air. These are the routes operated by the Boeing 737. You can see here we have some Dash 100 flights and Dash 300 flights, and so on. And if you are, this is the same form you will see if you seek employment. So when you see all these flights, you can choose to see, I only want to see my favorite, or I want to see those I am type rated for. So right now I'm not type rated for any of the aircraft operated by this airline. But let's go into apply for job. And I can change my criteria. For example, I'm considering applying for a job where I fly the Pilatus PC-12 for my next employment. So here I can see which how many routes there are, and for example, if I choose the usage, I can now see this map instead of seeing the usage report from previous version. And I can see they actually operate other aircraft types that I might want to fly for. For example, if I want to fly the Latitude, I can see which route they operate with that aircraft, or say I only want to see what they operate with the Pilatus. And if I choose what I'm type rated for, if I select all and type rated, you see I'll only see the Pilatus because that's the only one I'm type rated for. And I can specify if I want the airline, I want to only see those for which they are the carrier, only those for which they are operator. In this case, I see both. And if I think the balloon markers are hiding what I want to see, I can disable those, so I only see the routes. And of course, you can increase the size of this form if you want to zoom in on the map to see more detailed. So that's the changes to the airline usage window. The same if I go to a specific airport. For example, if I choose Aalborg, Denmark. You have this window like you had this window in previous version or before, but like the one in the logbook, it both showed the simulator aircraft and the aircraft type. In this window also the aircraft type had been removed, and you instead see the employer. All of these you see these are have all been flown as a training flight, and this one as a free flight, so I don't have an employer. If I select a gate for a flight, when you perform the flights, you can choose in here what was the gate that you were departing from or arrived at. If you chose to add those information, you can now see them here. So I can see in this case that this is both an out and in flight. It means I departed from Aalborg and I returned to Aalborg. So I can see here that this is where the parking place where I arrived, and I can see the flight time, and I can also see which one way. So if I fly in and out of Aalborg another time, I can see in the past which gates I have been used. You can choose favorite gates. For example, I've selected this one as one of my favorites, and if I edit, I can see I've written here that I can use the CJ4. For example, it's just a text to inform you. For example, if I choose this one as a as a favorite, I can choose write another aircraft type that's suitable for this gate. So when I hover over, you can see the comment, it says CJ4, so I know I can park a CJ4 here. But those gates are listed here with your log flights. Also in this version, a small change when you look at which airlines use this airport as a primary hub, secondary hub, or just servicing this airport, you now see the airline logos displayed over here. So it's a small change. One of the things you list for the airport here is the frequencies. These data have been extracted from the flight simulator by Make Runway, and in the past it only imported the flight called f5.csv that contained these information. However, that file only include the 25 Hertz separations of the frequencies. This version will look if you have the F5X CSV file available also. And if that file is found, it will be imported instead, as it include these frequency with 8.33 Hertz separation. For example, if we look Luxembourg, you see many of these end with a 5 as a third digit, and that's simply because it's now importing that file if found. When you edit an aircraft in this version, I use both for aircraft types. You cannot edit the aircraft type, but if you look in aircraft type, let's choose the CJ4, for example. You now have this new tab page called Airlines, and when it's displayed here with an asterisk, it means there are data here. And here you can simply see all of the airlines that are operating that aircraft. For example, this one, you can see that this airline is both carrier and operator of 4 of these aircraft types. In this case, none of them, there's only a carrier operator. But you can see which airlines operate this aircraft, so it can be a means of you to download, for example, the liveries or repaints for that aircraft. If you choose the CJ4 here, the user aircraft or the simulator aircraft, you also here see the airlines. Here you can tell the program which repaints you have, and for example, perhaps you want to, if you want to seek employment for this airline, perhaps you want to see if there is a repaint available, and if you find it and download it, you can add it here. Simply choose the airline, and you can enter if you have that repaint installed. One of the reasons to do that is when you perform the leg search, you can specify here that you must have the repaint, so you only assigned flight or choose flights that are for aircraft for which you actually have the correct repaints. So that's a small change to this page. For example, here with the ATR, you can see again which airlines are operating this the aircraft type on which the simulator aircraft is based. You can choose if you want to include the substitute. If I choose ATR 72 and I go to substitute and I type 400, I have not specified, but if I want to specify that this one is, I don't have a Q400 aircraft I can fly, but I can specify I want this aircraft is somewhat similar. You see it have a score of 89, so it's not perfect, but it's somewhat okay substitute. And if I include that and go to the airlines, I can say I want to include them right now. There is 71 different airlines that operate this aircraft. But if I click this one, you see the number is increased, and that's because now it also includes airlines that operate the Q400, because I specified the Q400 can be a substitute. So when you choose your substitute, going to the airline tab sheet, you can now see which airlines potentially you can seek employment with if you have the type rating for this aircraft. It's always important to back up your logbook, and especially when you install new versions. You can navigate to your user data folder, and here you see I have some different logbooks, but the one that's active I'm actually using, I can manually back up here in the File Explorer. But also you can actually use this Manage Logbook feature to do it. Here, this is my active logbook, and these are this is a clone, a backup, and these two are some tests I did, so I don't screw up my correct logbook, the one I'm using. So let's delete these two. This is a clone, I delete that also. So if I want to back up this one and I don't want to do it externally of the program, what I can do is say I want to clone this logbook. You could do that also in previous version. But what changes when you click OK to clone this one? In previous version, it will simply select and open this new logbook you cloned. In this version, it asks you, do you want to open it? And if I choose no, I stay using this original logbook, but now I also have this backup. So using this feature is an easy way for you to back up your logbook. You should back up it to an external drive and so on, but at least if you do it once or twice, you'll have a backup of your flight plan. As I said in the video recorded in January, this feature with logbook and employment is a new feature. I have tested it a lot, and I have not experienced a logbook was destroyed, but potentially there is a chance that an update will destroy your logbook in some way. Of course, I'll try to make sure it will never happen, but again, be sure to do a backup of your logbook so you don't lose any data. And the last thing I want to show in this video is a small change to the unit conversion form. It's simply now you have these fields you can enter instead of reaching for your calculator. If you need to multiply or divide some values, you can use this. For example, if you want to use a special passenger loadout and you don't want to change the passenger weights for male, female and children in your simulator aircraft, you can simply say, for example, I have 50 passengers, they each weigh 180 pounds, and you can see what is the total multiplying these two values. So this is the value, for example, you want to insert on the load sheet. For example, if we do a training flight and we use, let's choose the CDA4. We can see here the CDA4 as 9 passengers. So if I choose 9 passenger, it will simply add that weight. But what I can do instead is I can say 0 passenger, and I can open this form and say, what if I have 9 passenger that weighs 180? Then it's this value, and I can simply paste that in as my cargo weight, for example. And that's the way you can specify a specific weight to use. So those were the changes I decided to mention in this video. As per usual, if you go to the About box, you will see here all the changes made in this version. As you can see down here, actually a lot of things have been fixed in this version. I'm sure there are some changes I not mentioned in this video. So go look here. Thank you.